friends, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined again by our friend and returning co-host, the bravest co-host, and I'll tell you why in a moment, Carmelita Valdez McKoy. Sorry, I was laughing at the thought. How you doing, Carmelita? Welcome back.
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
I couldn't help but laugh because if you knew the amount of people I messaged and said, would you be willing to watch Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 and 2 again and talk with me? The amount of no, miss me replies. And you almost immediately said yes. So I appreciate that so much. Yeah, guys. So before we dive into Rob Zombie's Haddonfield, right? Please take a second and leave the show a rating and review wherever you find us, especially if that's Apple Podcast app. That helps us out enormously. We appreciate those of you that are doing it. We see you. We thank you. You can find us on all the social medias you're on. Please shout the show out there, retweets, stories on Instagram, all the cool kid stuff that I don't really know how to do, but I say out loud. So you get at us there. That's a great way to communicate with us. We love when you guys talk to us and reach out. In that vein, you can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. You can send us your ideas for movies to cover, themes, guest host, all that awesome stuff. In December, we always stuff your stockings and we do fan pick movies, so get at us early with your suggestions. That would be great. And you can see our faces as well as hear our voices on our YouTube channel, The Nerd Alchemist. Nerd Alchemist. I don't think there's a the. I don't know if YouTube's that specific, but Nerd Alchemist. All right. Guys, we are nearing the end of our run here in Haddonfield on this October mega medley descent into the horror abyss. One horror movie every day, 31 horror movies in a row for October. We're right in the thick of it now, guys, right in the middle. We thank you all for being with us. I know it's a lot of shows. I hope you guys are all still subscribed and you haven't canceled our asses for flooding you with shows. Rob Zombie's Halloween is much more divisive than I thought it was. Very visceral reactions from people online. I've been kind of testing the waters. A lot more of them extremely negative, which I did not quite remember it being that hostile towards this film. I guess it is one of those, you take the iconic franchise and you add a lot of new flavor and vibe to it. I can see how that rubs people the wrong way. The way I look at these movies is, of all of the Halloween movies that we were prepared to discuss, right? The ones I was most excited to discuss: Halloween 3, Halloween Resurrection, and then the Rob Zombie Halloweens. And what I like about what Rob Zombie does, right? I like a sequel that by this point, I think this is the 9th Halloween film. He had stuff he still wanted to say. He had things he wanted to examine. Were they right? Was it the best rendition of the original? Is it better than the original? I'm not willing to say all that. But I think at the end of the day, what it is very interesting, right? And in sequels, change the lens to where I can see the old in a newer light sometimes. And whether it works or doesn't, that adds a lot to the effect. So when I hit up Carmelita, you had never seen Rob Zombie's Halloween, and I didn't even ask you if you were a fan of the Halloween series. So why don't you walk us through your initial takes? Because a lot of us have been fighting this war for a long time. This Rob Zombie's a good filmmaker war for a long time, right? The lines have been drawn. It's a bloody stalemate. What did you think diving headfirst into the deepest, darkest end of the Halloween franchise?
This was an adventure.
That should have been on the poster, because that makes it sound like a playful romp.
This was an adventure. So I'm just going to give you a little background to let you know where I'm coming in here. So I am a fan of Carpenter's Halloween and Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I did see the 2018 Halloween.
Yes.
I dipped out, though, after number 2 the first time around.
So you're pretty much unacquainted with all of the middle section, the chasing of the niece, the Paul Rudding, the druids.
Nope.
Yeah, not going to the prep school to get lore. So you missed a lot of stuff.
I didn't go there.
A lot of
I
people
didn't
would
go
argue
there.
not great stuff. Okay, so let me do this. This is always a good litmus test. If you were to rank the big three, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween, where does Halloween fall for you? Probably low, since you only saw the first two.
Well, that's the funny thing, right? Because I tapped out early, it's pristine in my mind.
It holds its mystique, right? You never got a Freddy's Dead.
Yes. So and Halloween has a special place in my heart. I saw Carpenter's Halloween way too young. I did not go trick-or-treating in 1983 because I had watched Halloween and I was so scared that I would not go trick-or-treating that year.
Yeah.
So, so I love it. And I tapped out and missed a big chunk of the sequels. And I was just blissful in that little space. So coming into this, I knew
you came back to your favorite resort and someone had spray painted the walls. There's demonic teenagers smoking cigarettes in your living room.
Yeah. But and typically I have the tendency to be a purist. I'm usually pretty down on remakes, reboots, any of that.
Okay. Now see, that's something I lost. I think it was around the time when my kids were born, right? Because you start rewatching old movies that you loved with your kids. Or not even movies you love, but like my kids were like, I want to watch Clash of the Titans. I'm like, the old one that I love? He's like, no, the one with the big cartoon monsters. And you're like, that movie sucks. And then you watch, you're like, I get it now. I see my kids loving it. You're like, I get it. So like, I think when you have kids, you start getting soft around the edges, right? Because I feel like what I look for now in sequels and remakes is like, I just want to think about it differently, right? That's what I always, and that's the thing. I don't know where you fall on this, right? Because the way I imagine this movie to be is if it'd be the equivalent of like every time you went to your favorite coffee shop, right? What if the barista's like, but I am going to rub this sandpaper on your face for 30 seconds before you can order your drink, right? That's kind of how this movie feels at times. It's like, yeah, you're giving me exactly what I like. It feels like my happy place, but oh my God, if Ronnie talks again. But I think this is the thing I like about it though, right? Compared to the other sequels, this felt like a love letter to Halloween. And one of the things is that people are like, it shits all over the original and blah, blah. I think he's the most loving of the original, right? He loves this shit. And he had all these other things he wanted to look at. And yes, he changes Loomis a lot. And, there are all these things that somewhat change. But I thought that was the best stuff, right? Because there's a part at the end of the movie where Laurie's running around the house, right? Like, I'm crawling in the walls, blah, blah. And I was just tuned out. I was like, of all the interesting things I've seen, and this movie's 2 hours inexplicably, right? Like, no need for that.
It is.
Because they do like the 50-minute like childhood prequel. And you're like,
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so you're like, all right. But I find Rob Zombie's Haddonfield and Halloween universe fascinating, right? Because I get it. Like a lot of the people who really like it, they like it because it is easily the most brutal Halloween movie.
Dark.
A lot of times to the point that I'm like in a meta sense, it makes me uncomfortable to be a horror movie fan, right? But I like it because I think it's fascinating. It's like talking with your best friend and really, really digging deep into what is this story about? What is Michael Myers about? And I find it fascinating, right? And to me, that's the number one best thing a movie can be, is interesting, right?
Yeah.
So where would you like to start? What do you want to you want to just dive in on the childhood? This is the new stuff.
I'm gonna, before we do that, I'm gonna say I am with you. I went into this, I tried to keep my mind clean. I tried to go into this without any preconceived anything. And I knew we were gonna talk about it, and I was just like, don't be a little bitch. Watch this. And don't harp on how it's different or the same or whatever. Just go into it clean, which I was able to do. And it is fascinating. And I found myself really enjoying the places that he took this to.
Right. Yeah. So,
and right off the bat with this whole prequel thing, with this whole, the making of Michael Myers.
Yes.
It's fascinating.
Now this to me is I love this part. And there is a small portion of me that wonders what this movie looks like if they never bring him back into the future, right? So for me, I would almost, if I were to do like a fan edit of this movie, which I don't really endorse on this show, right? Like watch the art as they made it. Take what you can, right? Don't just be like, oh, I could do it better, you know, because I watched it one time, right? Rob Zombie probably watched this movie 600 times, right?
Yeah.
But there is a world of this movie where I could end at his mother's suicide and go right to Laurie Strode and the dead babysitter in that basement, right? Where Michael is now at his emotional crossroads of this movie, which sounds weird to say. It's probably the only Halloween movie where like Michael's in a bit of an emotional tumult, right? Like that's something that never has existed because it's so, okay. So yeah, let's talk about, because I think this is the big like rub of the movie, right? Is Halloween 1 became a masterpiece and a classic, not for a lot of reasons, right? But I think what it became universal to people is this is where you lived, right? This isn't a spooky camp. You didn't do anything wrong. This was just, what if a Norman Rockwell painting started killing each other, right? This is just a boy that for no reason, we never get an explanation. He may or may not have known his sister got the world's shortest sex. Like that guy must have busted in like 1 second, which I already went over in Halloween 1. I know I've labored that point, but I think it's a seminal moment. Seminal moment. Yeah, it's a very important seminal moment in the very first movie. And because it's so fucking fast.
It is.
And then he runs out and this little idyllic boy is revealed, right? That's all we fucking know. And in that moment, it's, I have a kid. My kid trick-or-treats. My teenager's going to fuck someday. You know, all of these fears, right? This castle up on a little mini hill, right? In the dark. You don't see any neighbors' houses. Like, we have our own land. We've achieved the dream. And now our dream is full of slaughters, right? It's a nightmare. That is something that is universally scary to all of us. It taps into all of us, right? I have 2 kids, and every now and again, like today, my kid, you know, he was like mad at his mom and me. He's 2. He's not even 3. And he goes, I hate you, to his mom. And we're just like, what the fuck? Like, where did he even learn that from? Yeah, we're like, where did you hear that? Like, we don't talk like that. We don't say we hate each other, right? And he goes, the dog said it. And I looked at Amy, I'm like, that's serial killer shit. And so then you're like, what if like my kid was a Michael Myers, right? So like this is a universal fear. In Rob Zombie's Halloween, this Haddonfield is like the rundown Haddonfield. Like this reminds me of like we were Haddonfield. We had like a factory come in and we all had great middle class jobs in the 50s. And that factory closed down and meth came in and, you know, like that classic Vice News story, like everything went wrong. So when you watch this movie, I would imagine that most audiences see nothing resembling their home life, the way they imagine most families live, or the American dream in this Myers household, right? This is a house of horrors, a true house of horrors before the first murder.
No, most definitely. So I think what I really enjoy about this is that, so Carpenter's Halloween, that aspect of Michael Myers, that there is no rhyme or reason, that there is no precipitating event, that we don't know what the motive is what's perfect about that. And I love that. And Rob Zombie's choice to do this differently doesn't take away from that. I'm able to completely separate the two. And in this movie, I think what I loved about this was you get this snapshot of a neglected, abused kid. A lonely kid with hardly anyone in his corner, just this awful home life. And right, a lot of people don't relate to that.
Yeah, and thankfully so, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm glad that people's home lives rarely resemble Rob Zombie movies.
But what I love about this is that we start to connect with him at that point, and the casting of, young Michael Myers is really good because that kid has those big
Mm-hmm.
blue eyes.
But he
and those
also
little
looks
round
like he hasn't
feet.
slept ever, right?
Yeah,
He's got a real
yeah,
like ghastly thing about him, yeah.
he does. And I love that we start sympathizing with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to set up the viewer for this really uncomfortable thing. We're not scared of him because we don't know why he is the way he is. It's kind of scary when you start to sympathize with him because you know what he's going to become.
Yeah.
You know what he's capable of. And you find yourself, I found myself anyway, like you feel for this kid. When he takes down that bully in the woods, it's this roller coaster of emotions. Like the bully, like what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad for you. And then when the bully's like crying and he's clearly scared out of his wits and he is begging for his life, then you have that it like jolts you out of that revenge fantasy and you go, oh wait, no, this is not.
Yeah.
And so you have those like roller coaster moments of I sympathize. I see how this happened to this kid. And I think later on, Loomis mentions that Michael Myers was this perfect storm, this perfect blend of internal and external factors.
Yes.
And I think they did a great job of illustrating that. And I think, too, one of the things about this Halloween is that it's coming out in 2007. At that point, you've got a couple of decades of true crime mania
Mm-hmm.
in the media. You have a more widespread, maybe not understanding, but a more widespread acknowledgement that there are personality disorders that cause, it's not just this unnamed evil.
Right.
We have like a more of a mainstream understanding that there are people with personality disorders and that they can be capable in some cases of these extreme acts of violence. You have in the late 80s and 90s, you had the media covering cases of child murderers, kids that killed other kids that attacked adults. So I think that, by the time this comes out in 2007, there is a story to tell about what does it look like to see this killer in the making. And it works.
Yes. And it somewhat kind of goes at one of the core foundations of Halloween, which is it's a little bit naive. And the movie plays a little bit like a folktale, right? Of the kid who's actually just an empty vessel, right? Like this empty changeling or whatever amongst us, right? He looks like one of us, but he's not. He has no soul. It kind of plays in this folklore, fable kind of way. And by the time this movie comes out, like you said, we have enough knowledge to know that almost no serial killer that I've ever read about or learned about, right? I think maybe there are a couple, right, that, had pretty good home lives. This and that. Almost all of them, though, have these kind of red flag moments, right? The shame when they're developing their sexuality, bedwetting, animal mutilations, right? And you see a lot of that in Michael, right? And so I think it gets back to this Michael Myers as just that shape, right? The pod of a human that was the kid you loved, and then someday the lights go off and he starts murdering, right? That is scary. In the same way that, oh, there's a monster under my bed scary. It's a magical scary. This is, we all know people that, have been abused by parents or things like you see these things and you worry about kids. Like you see kids that were going through it when you were in school. And this is getting to that logical extent where it's very strange to see Michael Myers as a borderline defenseless victim, right? I mean, he does mutilate that fucking rat like immediately, really, right? And you're like, that's not good. But then he comes down as being a nice brother. He's talking to his mom nice. And this guy, this terrible, terrible person who will do a segment on Ronnie before you know it, is just laying into him. And that's his fucking life. This guy just on him, his sister, on him. He goes to school and he gets attacked But I would argue to people, right, the way that John Carpenter did the same thing. Michael Myers is walking amongst your streets, through your house, killing your children. This movie accomplishes that to me in an also interesting way, which is you see the fight in the bathroom, and that's pretty normal kid shit. I remember that, like, pretending to be tough. Like, you and your buddies, like, yeah, maybe we'll, get in a fight on the playground. Or, like, meet me after lunch. We're going to fight. And, like, we all remember those, like, Hallmark moments, like, oh, God.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right? So you see this go down. And when Michael runs out of that principal's office, right? And you see the kid, he's spitting in another kid's hat that's defenseless. I mean, it's a shitty bully move. But it falls within the boundaries of normal human child behavior, right? This is probably another kid who has his own problems. His dad's telling him about the titty bar and shit. So, like, he's probably already has his own issues, right? Maybe he was abused. This is kind of a Jonathan Bender setup, right? From Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
When they get to those woods, though, and Michael puts the mask on and attacks him, we are shown right there in that moment the snap, right? Because, killing animals, you could make all these, that's bad too, but, we kill animals to eat every day, blah, blah, blah. This is a boy who now puts this mask on and he feels separated from us, from humanity. And you see the bully, the kid that was beating him up and torturing these other kids, reduced to no longer play acting and true childlike fear, crying out in help.
Yeah.
And you all of a sudden realize, oh my fucking God, I am watching a child murder another child. And it is horrifying in a way that I really don't think even that opening of the original Halloween captures. There is something so demented in that moment of Michael lifting the mask to smile, right? So that it is somewhat bleeding into his human side, that he's getting titillated by it. And just watching that boy, that child, the more there's blood on his face and his wild hair is going about, you're like, that looks like a fucking kid now. Now he's not talking tough. He's just a little kid. And when he goes limp and Michael's standing over him, it is that is one of those truly horrifying taboos that we still don't accept of. This fucking kid is just now a murderer, right? And I think laying the groundwork for that is more interesting to me, right? And I'm all for magical thought and magical horror too.
Yeah.
But I think this is the thing, man. We've had that movie so many times, right? By part 2, he's a superhuman. By part 4 and 5, he's coming for his family line, and there's black shadowy figures. And by part 6, it's a cult of druids. Then there's always a Michael Myer, a Thorn running around. And it gets fucking absurd, and it's insane in its magicalness, right? This gets back to that broken Haddonfield idea, right? Like, there are just places and people and, the world just takes too much out of you. And what happens when the lights go out? And I think layering that onto, because I know a lot of people probably don't like the kid Michael and the institution stuff, that is some of my favorite shit. Because when Michael reverts back to his, like, protective shell of, I'm just Michael Myers, and then you see that slip until the lights all the way go off. I find this section of the movie so fascinating. It is among my favorite stuff in the film. What did you make of this Michael's finally breaking bad?
I really liked the whole sequence, and I like that we got to see McDowell's Loomis meeting with Michael. We get to see the little bit of rapport that they're building.
Yes.
I like that we get to see these kind of flashes of Michael connecting with someone, even just this little bit, because those little flickers of this kid can still connect with people, as those start to dim and it gets to, oh, he hasn't spoken in 2 weeks. Oh, he's not responding at all anymore. You get that gradual decline. And then so when he finally snaps and just completely goes off the rails, is no longer connected, it's even more like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like now we're really in it.
Well, that's wild
and
too, because
that happened.
Yeah, and see, I love that part, because him walking through the house and killing everyone, he's fucking intense and brutal, right? That's how Rob Zombie sets his aura. The drunk being tied to the chair and his throat sliced, that will haunt me forever. I've never reclined in a chair since seeing that movie and been like, Oh, fuck. You know what I mean? Like, I fall asleep in recliners a lot. Like, ooh, boy. The kid just getting his fucking skull brained in, right?
Yeah.
And the, kid in the Halloween costume, and he was just sitting there playing with his candy, and then's like, it's go time.
Yeah.
That all is horrifying, but in a different manner to me.
This is the cool thing. And it's a through line that starts in this film, and they pick it up again in 2 when we get there.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that when his mother is getting ready to go to work, and she says to him, I know that's been bad this week, but starting tomorrow, it's going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Michael, that night, after his sister blows him off to screw her boyfriend, and Ronnie's on the couch talking shit as always, and he has to go out by himself.
Yes.
It's like he realizes, like, the only way tomorrow's going to be better if my family is just me, my mom, and Boo.
I will say, we talked a lot about the horrifying things in this opening. It happens twice where you're watching some horrific scene of family emotional abuse or even domestic abuse, right? Like physical abuse. And all of a sudden, you'll just hear the baby start screaming. So when mom goes to work and you're like, shh, that baby's left alone in the house with these fucking people. And it is so, like, it actually just turned my blood cold. I was like, oh, right?
That's just as scary. That's just as
like
scary.
That kid,
Michael.
that baby's just surviving in this world, right? And then the murders are all happening with that baby in the house. That is an extra thing. Like, even when he's yelling at, when Ronnie's doing his bits and he like smashes all the shit off the table, when you hear the baby start crying, you're like, oh, fuck. Oh, my God. Like, Michael is young and innocent and you feel for him, but you're like, he's going to murder. I know he's going to murder, right? It's kind of the trick the movie has to play is you can't do the Halloween 1 opening because we're not shocked anymore. We know he's going to be the giant murder guy. We get it. And that baby is like one of those stark reminders of, woo, this is an even worse household situation than you're imagining. But
no, absolutely.
Yeah, but see, that's what I like, is that Rob Zombie finds these little moments. And that's the thing, I think he gets so much flack. And I understand from like a certain way people like to watch horror movies, right? Some people aren't into the slashers. And some of this is bordering on, somewhat torture porn.
Yeah.
I.e. the Annie scene, right? Just not comfortable to watch at times. But I think people do not give him credit because of all of the abrasiveness. Like I was telling you before we started, the dialogue in this film is so fucking abrasive and so hard to sit through, right? And then the brutality is so fucking abrasive. But I think it's conditioning us, right? This is what that kid lived in. Like, no wonder he went a little bit fucking crazy. Well, a lot of bit fucking crazy, I guess I would say. But I think that sadly, right, that prickly exterior has kept people from some of these really cool human touches that were added to this faceless. I mean, in the first one, he's literally referred to as the Shape, right? And by the time you get to like 4, 5, 6, whatever, he's just a Jason Voorhees knockoff, right? So he lost something, right? This brings back this extra touch, which I think makes this movie sail to me. Like, there's a really weird scene in the opening when he goes into his sister's room, right? I killed her boyfriend. I go back upstairs. And when he touches her legs very gently, right? And I was like, is this an edible complex thing? Is this maybe he wishes him and his sister had a bond, right? It's unnerving. It's a little incestual. You're like, what is But that's one of those moments. Like, I focus on that more than like her running down the hall getting stabbed. That's a really weird choice to add in the moment right there. And I didn't know quite what to make of that. I don't know if you got a read on that.
Yeah, that was one of those scenes where I was like kind of on edge, and and because it's Rob Zombie, as he's kind of touching her leg, I thought, oh God, please don't have it be anything more than just touching her leg. Please. Rob is
one that you don't give him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to show you something you don't want to see.
I was a little like, oh, so we didn't go there. So yeah, it's a moment that reads so many different ways depending. I mean, you can project onto it. I think that's what's cool about this is that, yes, we're getting all of this backstory of his family life and some insight. But there are moments that are still baffling. Why does he do that?
Well, because I was like, is it he
We'll
sees
never know.
maybe she's breaking the way his mom did, right? Because he had seen the ad of his mother. I thought that
Right?
was a cool addition, like him having to confront that. Like, because the only warm spot in this opening is Michael and his mother seem to have a genuine loving bond, right? And
Yes.
Michael is bonded to Boo because she's a baby, right? So there is this small little unit that you're like, they could, if they got out, like maybe, just maybe. Oh, wait, Michael's already murdering things like animals and shit. So probably not
Right.
going to go well.
It's too late. Maybe at some point
Right.
it wouldn't have been.
But you're like,
yeah,
they
now it's too late.
have a very sweet and tender relationship. And to see that's, mom has to make money and, everyone's judging her for that. That's weaponized against him, right? His mom's doing what she can to provide for him. That's weaponized against him, right? The fact that the mom just lets Ronnie exist in that house is a lot of red flags, right? Like, you love this kid so much. Why are you doing that? All the way through her with him at, the sanitarium. I just like these little personal. And so to me, I was like, is he seeing his sister as you could be like mom, but you have also gone down this bad path? Is this like the, anti-sex moment? Or is this maybe he's so in love with his mom? There is this moment of,
Yeah.
and maybe it's all of that, right? This kid's brain is obviously scrambled at this point. But I love those moments. That small moment adds a lot to me, man. Like, I've already seen all the fucking murders I need Michael Myers to commit for my whole life. I'll take more. They're fucking fun. But that leg touch haunted the shit out of me. I'm still like, ugh, when I think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's still freaking me out.
It gives you the creeps, and you're just kind of like, I don't know exactly what that means, but I know that it's not good.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. And Michael has Polaroids. So you're like, what is this? It's a horrifying series of events, right? And then I think, so you pair that, but there's like weird scenes where like the cherries on the cars are going, but the cops are frozen, and Michael looks at us before we go to the sanitarium, right? So there's like,
I love that.
Yeah, that's a really cool moment, right? Like, he is so separated from us at this point, he's gone, right? But then he's brought back immediately. He's having like an orange juice and shit, and he's talking to his buddy, with the funny voice. This segment I love, right? Watching his mom trying hard to, because you're like, what is her life looking like right now? What's her day to day? And she's
nightmare.
trying so hard to keep him with us on this plane of existence, right? And to watch it, but that final attack, right, where he stabs the nurse and she's bleeding out, I found that doubly fascinating because I like the fact that it was her making a comment about Boo, who we'd already seen him take the mask off and essentially almost act as if he hadn't done it, or he was telling Boo he had made her life better, right? He was going to give her what he did not have, right? That his parents were unable to give him, right? I took him out for you, you'll be fine. Which he may have been right until he came back, right? And then, so that scene of her, Boo is the trigger, right? Like, Boo couldn't be related to someone like you. After maybe he had done part of that for her benefit. I thought that was a cool trigger moment. But when they come in and Michael turns around and is just roaring with anger, and you see his mom collapse and just stare into the face, this little sweet-voiced boy that she loves so much and fought with the principal and gave him the benefit of the doubt, she fucking finally sees behind the mask. She sees her true son. That was just a fucking A+ moment to me.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. When you can just imagine, like, she was literally out of the room for
Going
like
home.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
They had just barely made it down the hall to the elevator. Like, when the massacre at the family home, she's been at work for hours. I would imagine, this is me speculating, but I would imagine like you come home to something like that and there's a part of your brain that doesn't really connect like how that happened in that span of time.
Oh, I mean, it has to be the most surreal, right?
Yeah.
You would be immediately overwhelmed and then just shut down. Like, what the fuck is happening? Yeah.
For it to be literally 30 seconds, you literally just left the room. And this is what you come back to.
She's probably like, I got to go to the grocery store. I got to, oh my God. And then that was one of those, but see that, and then her going home and taking her own life, right? I thought that was just a really really interesting series of events, right? And it gets back to the thing that I loved about Michael Myers is that originally it wasn't as magical, right? You look back now and you're like, there's definitely somewhat of magical thinking in that film. But it was just the kid who had gone bad, and, your kid could do that. He came back, right? It's Halloween. He's got something with Halloween. I like the adding back the human, right? And I think it's so weird that the way people talk about Rob Zombie, they fucking throw out, especially in part 2, right? They just throw out the human elements that he finds in that film and act like it is this torture porn exercise, and I just don't see it that way. It's
there. It's
fucking brutal to watch. But I think a lot of what this movie is right, it's the classic us paying for the sin of the monsters we create. And I think there is something that is really fun to explore that way, right? If you want Superman, Michael Myers, we have a bunch of those movies, right?
Oh yeah.
Why would Rob Zombie just it's like when Gus Van Sant remade Psycho shot for shot. Like, what is the value of that? Do something different.
There's none.
Right, but that's what I mean. Now people would be like, well, Rob Zombie did it, and people got mad at him because of white horses. And you're like, to me, that is as memorable as almost anything in this series, right?
Yeah.
So I think this opening part of the movie is so well done and so fascinating, while shockingly abrasive and hard to sit through at times. That is what Rob Zombie at his peak of Halloween does. I think when we cut 15 years later and we watch him essentially start to remake the beats of Halloween 1 is where the movie slips a bit for me, right? This is the part I didn't latch onto, because now we see Rob Zombie trying to get back to that. Now we're on the right side of the tracks part of town. But it still always feels wrong. It feels false. You know what I mean? It feels like, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain it. It reminds me, there's this, I think there's this documentary called The Queen of Versailles or something, right? Super rich Florida people came into new money and they're just like trashy about it, right? They're building this biggest mansion ever because they wanted it. It's a really good documentary. It's one of those sad, you're like, why am I enjoying this though? It makes you feel bad about yourself for liking it. But it reminded me of that, right? Like, these are people playing at the American dream, but everything feels false and wrong, right? Whereas the opening, while not hopefully identifiable with most of us, feels real, right? There's like a guttural nastiness to this opening, right? It feels like a real house of sadness. Nothing in this next part worked for me in a lot of like the establishing of the world and characters.
Right. As you're saying that, it makes me think that works on a different level, in that once we've seen how society has failed a segment of the population, it is kind of fake.
Yeah.
It is kind of fake and kind of wrong.
Yeah.
That
there's it's a good point. We literally meet Lori when her dad's like, hey, go drop these papers off at the house where your family got fucking murdered.
Yeah.
So we can sell this fucking place.
Right. So
like a family's coming to look at that house. That is a brushed over detail where he's like, a family wants to see the Michael Myers fucking murder home that we have not bulldozed. That's wild. And her dad's just like, walk over there and drop the papers.
Right.
We actually did forget, though, there is a giant section of the movie I just completely glossed over, which is now Michael Myers is a 7-foot tall behemoth. Like an actual hulking monster, which I was like, that is such a good choice in this film.
It is.
Because just seeing him on screen makes him so much fucking scarier than any version of Michael Myers we've ever seen. So you're like, yeah, that guy could kill them without fighting training. Right?
Yeah,
he's only been doing paper mache for years, but he's gigantic.
And it works. You know, those moments where he doesn't have the mask on, just his hair in his face. But because of his size, it's still imposing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love that segment, too, because now we're getting again to he's being re-victimized by this new security guard, who, again, this movie crams in 2 of the worst, most despicable horror movie characters I've ever seen. Right off the bat, right? So that guy and them are coming to commit rape. He goes in and he's already, right? We see the nice, like, Danny Trejo's like, hey, man, just don't start none, won't be none. I'll be good to you. I love that bit. And he's actually the one, right? And he actually is going to come back into my thoughts on part 2, where he's like, hey, Mikey, like, I did time too. And he reformed himself, right? He's a guy who did bad, who's now good. And he's like, go inside yourself, right? There's no walls in there. There's no walls in there. And you're like, oh my God, you created this fucking murder machine. Like, you did that. And again, I think part of the unraveling of that is what part 2 is about.
Yeah.
But to see that, and then it sets Michael up as, even if you are kind to him and decent, you're done. Which is strange, because Michael's sitting there not concerned with the rape or the violation of his room or anything, like, or violation in his room, right, of that act.
Right.
But when they start fucking smacking his mask around,
it's over.
That's when he's like, okay, now you're fucking going to get murdered. And he kills a lot of fucking people. But the Danny Trejo one, that's another one of those. I love that little personal touch, that personal moment. And that was gut-wrenching. So you're like, just walk away. Walk away before the TV. Show a little of that. Rob Zombie showing us there was a man under that mask. Nope. Smashed.
It broke my heart. And you know what I like? What I like leading up to this is, like, you know, so he does have this little bit, some kind of a connection with Danny Trejo's character. However minuscule, whatever little thread it is. And he had this little thread of a connection with Loomis. His mother's dead and gone, so she doesn't come to visit anymore. Then Loomis tells him, I can't work with you anymore.
Yeah.
And then I wonder, did he overhear Danny Trejo's character saying he was retiring in 3 months?
That could be. That could be. I wondered if it was just the, because it is weird. It's like, the timing of it is fascinating, right? That this guy does that. And I think there is that moment where when he gets out in the hallway and Danny's thinking about putting the handcuffs on him, right? Because one, you're like, this guy's so good, he actually cares to get Michael back in there, right? If Michael doesn't go in that cell, they're going to shoot him and kill him, right? Like, I can reach this boy, right? I have raised this kid, essentially. Because you're like, just fucking run. If you see that Hulk, run. Like, he's covered in... Get the fuck out of there. You're retiring in 3 weeks. What are you doing? But he reaches out, right? And I wondered in that moment if there was a small part of Michael that's like, I've got my mask. I've got my infinite abyss of the brain, right? Like, I'm cool to go back in. This guy's always been nice to me. And that was kind of the test case for, oh my God, I can do whatever I want. Like, I can get out of here. Because we've never seen fully unleashed Michael as an adult since he's gone through this transformation. So it felt a little testing out, which almost makes it like, like when those orca fucking smack the seals up in the air to like liquefy their bodies and they're just playing with it. You're like, ooh. But yeah, that was a heartbreaker. So again, another great personal touch I like at the sanitarium before we kind of rip all the heart out of the movie. Which is funny because I think in part 2, Laurie Strode really fucking pulls through, right? Like really fucking good in part 2. What did you think of this somewhat, it's not Van Zandt remake of Carpenter's Halloween, but there's a lot of those classic moments, right? Like a scene that made me laugh is when Laurie's coming home to fix Mr. Boner or whatever the skeleton is. And Michael Myers is following behind her. And I was like, I know they did that in the first one. I know it's Halloween and it's been a long time since those murders, but I'm like, that mask on a 7-foot-tall satanic mechanic? No. That guy can't walk through your streets. Like, come on, right? So, what did you take from this part? Were there things that worked well for you in this part, right? Because in Carpenter's, this is where we see that Laurie is the good girl. She's a bit of she's kind of setting up a lot of what become final girl tropes, right? Yeah. Throughout, right? She's the good girl. She's responsible. She takes care of things. She does smoke a little weed and wants Ben Tramer. This Laurie is a little looser version of that, but still like pretty together. What did you make of the setting up of this Haddonfield?
I think you put it really well in the beginning. This idea of this being a love letter to Halloween. And so I kind of got that feeling from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's borrowing a lot of imagery, and there's a lot of similarities to the original in this section. It's a little updated.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be me. I was a little weirded out by the bagel joke with her mom.
So that is,
what the fuck was that?
That's exactly my point, right? Is that is one of those moments where the Rob Zombie-ness is too much. Where it's like she is our, and I was like, maybe teenagers make that joke with each other once they get to school. I don't care who, none of my parents would have been like, hey, this bagel looks like a pussy, watch me like go down on it. Like, that's just not a thing.
Nope.
And this is supposedly in Illinois. I grew up in Indiana. It's like, and they obviously, the mom was still bothered by it later, right? So this would have been, but it's just like, oh, daddy, ooh. And I was like, oh my God, this is her genetic Myers-ness coming out, right? She remembers where she was raised, right? She's running amok. But yeah, like that scene though, that scene is a bit of a microcosm of what doesn't work for me. Because although Laurie's adopted and we, know that she's not of that family, she should be built into the fabric of that family and this community. Yes. This is her. She got the new start that Michael gave her. And that scene is a classic example of why did that make it through the edit? Because it doesn't work for Laurie. It doesn't work for the Strodes. It doesn't add anything of value. Unless you're just like, there's not enough bagel sex prop comedy, right?
Yeah, it's totally pointless. It doesn't work. I think what does work better is the scene where Laurie is with her two best friends, and they're like having like teen girl talk.
Yeah,
like talking about cheerleading and talking about, I think this teacher was flirting with me. Truer.
It's updated, right? Because that's the thing. I didn't have a lot of like girl talk walking home from school, but I know from the women in my life that they're like, yeah, we don't just talk about like brushing our hair and dress. Like we talk the same as you. Yeah. We have the same thoughts as you, right? And movies always just show us as like, oh, we're damsels in distress, which Laurie Strode in Halloween 1 is a bit of that until the end when she starts fighting back. Yeah. Right. They definitely set her up as this, she is a bit walking on sunshine, right? So yeah, stuff like that. I mean, that's the thing. I think maybe when the young people are by themselves, this kind of grittier Rob Zombie thing does play a little more, right? But then, like, here's another Laurie thing that was baffling. I'm like, they're just doing so many jokes about fucking in front of these two 9-year-olds, like 8 and 9-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like, I have kids that play at my house, right? My neighbors have kids, similar to my age. And then they have an older son who's 9 and our other neighbor's 9. So, like, I know kids that age, right? 9 to 10, 11, whatever. The thought that I'd be like, hey, I'm going to go fuck my wife, like, right in front of them. And that's just a normal standard of life.
No way.
And that's what I mean. It's just so, like, I was befuddled. I was like, why? Why? Because how can you look at the Myers family and graft all of this humanity on these fucking human monsters, and then you just can't make normal people feel real at all, right?
Just feel normal.
Yeah, and it takes away a little bit that when the murders start, you're kind of just like, all right. Like I don't feel that bonded, and I guess that's kind of a bullshit argument. It's a bit of a straw man I just presented to you. Because when you watched the original Halloween, did you feel really upset when Annie got murdered? Like choked out in the car? Did you no, not truly, right? So that's a bit of a straw man argument. But I do think I am surprised at how little he got out of that segment of the movie, considering how fucking much he got out of the rest of the movie to me, right?
Yeah.
It was a little bit baffling. All right, so let's talk about our new Loomis, right? That's old Loomis. We don't want old Loomis. We want new Loomis. I weirdly enough, I kind of like his turn in part 2 more because they hone in on what's new about him, right? But this movie does focus a little bit on new Loomis, right? I like the idea, like you said, of seeing him work with Michael. You get into, because when we meet Donald Pleasance, he's just amazing at giving these like soliloquies, right? This flowery, poetic language on the nature of good and evil. And you're like, well, he's been talking to a brick wall for 15 years. So he has to do a lot of the heavy lifting, right? This Loomis has this, but this Halloween seemingly focuses in on the this is a man who, whether he feels like a failure or not, he's cashing in. This is a cashing in Loomis a lot, right? And that's a lot of what they get to in part 2. I don't know that it's as strong in this one. What did you make of the direction of Dr. Loomis in this movie?
So I'm the opposite of you. I actually liked Loomis better in this first one than the second one, and we'll get to the second one when we get there. But I think what I kind of liked about him in this one is, okay, first of all, I have to say it's a great touch to have Malcolm McDowell play the doctor in the movie about a psychopathic young killer.
I see what you did there. Yeah, right.
Given his
he gets the eye clamps on Michael Myers.
Yes. Given his Clockwork Orange history,
yes,
I think it's a beautiful touch to have Malcolm McDowell be in this story, and now he is playing the doctor who is maybe trying to help, is maybe trying to really help his career more than he's trying to help the kid. There's some question.
Well, he definitely just walks away and writes the book, right? So there is a cashing in effect of this. The question is, do you see things throughout the movie that I get the vibe, because in the original Halloween, to me, Loomis, it feels a little Ahab or Van Helsing, right? Like, I have been warning you for years, and they're like, dude, he sits there and doesn't talk and doesn't move. Like, stop coming into the break room and screaming at us every day. You suck. Right? Like, Loomis is a little bit of a hard to work with guy in the first one. Right? So there's a little Ahab, like, I'm going after him. And when he's released, you get the sense that Loomis in part 1, right? I didn't really think about it until we did this really deep dive for this month. There is a bit of you that like, oh, Loomis is fucking stoked that Michael got out and killed all these motherfuckers. Because now he's been right. And Dr. Loomis, above all else, feels like a guy who perhaps looks down at the rest of us as lessers, right?
Right.
And so this Loomis feels, he doesn't have that authoritative vibe of Pleasance, right? So he does feel like he's kind of there and he's putting around. When he went to Haddonfield on his mission to save these kids, I did wonder, is he there to save them from the big bad monster and fight evil like Donald Pleasance was? Or is he like, this is going to make some good chapters. This is going to make some, I'll get a new foreword on my book. I couldn't tell.
It's a little ambiguous, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
Is that there's moments where, he's like, when he's there at the cemetery with Sid Haig.
Yeah.
And, he's like, oh, yeah, that book was a masterpiece.
Yeah, he's like, just, the fucking blood money. He's like, I heard it was a masterpiece. Where were you going?
Right. Like, so there's these moments where his arrogance and his, his, I don't want to say narcissism because I don't know if it goes quite that far, but,
I think that's a safe assumption.
Yeah. Where his self-absorption, where like this is really about him. This case is about him working the case.
Yeah.
There's moments of that, and then there's other moments, when he shows up and he tries to help Lori there at the end.
Yes.
And when he tries to reach out to Michael, it feels genuine.
Yes.
But there's all these moments in between where it's ambiguous. What is he really here for?
Yeah.
And maybe it's complicated. Maybe it's both things.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a different version, because Loomis is so fucking like, I will throw the harpoon. I will be dragged to the depths. It doesn't matter in part 1. This guy, he does make the move, but this is a man who we see in that final scene, right? The same way that Michael's mother is destroyed, right? Because she can't handle the crushing of her reality. Loomis is very much that way. He comes in as the hotshot doctor to the school, Because he seemingly is like, I've been looking for a case like this. This is exactly what I want. Right? And it feels almost like Michael's going to be his ticket. And then through the course of treatment, he begins to realize that his arrogance, I would say, right? That I will fix this kid. I will understand this mind. Something so primordial is happening in this person, right?
Yes.
That your little techniques of, oh, well, you saw your mom's boobs at school, so that's why you were sent off, right? His tricks are so inadequate to deal with the primordial evil in front of him that there has to be a bit of him that's like, my whole life is a fucking lie, right? When he sits there and watches that nurse get murdered, and then Michael doesn't talk to him for another 15 years, that has to somehow take the piss out of this, I'm a hotshot psychiatrist, blah, 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 right? And when he writes the book, maybe this is him rebuilding in his flowery monologuing, I will show the world again how smart and insightful I am. I wonder, though, in that last moment, right, it had a vibe of like the snake churches, right? Where it's like, I am holy, I'm so holy the snakes can't kill me with venom. And then it's like, ow! It's like, oh, my belief wasn't as strong as I thought. Because he does. He goes in and he shoots Michael in the back and pulls her out of the pool, and he keeps fighting, right? He has moments to run. He doesn't. So I did want, that felt unrealistic to me for this Loomis, right? There is a part of me that's like, I'll go get help, right? Like, I'll be back, right? I'm going to go see if the neighbor's got a cell phone for this Loomis. But yeah, like just standing there and trying to save Lori. That's the part I was like, is this just like, well, we can't have Loomis be such a prick. We got to bring it back. And then when Rob Zombie's writing the sequel, he's like, there's nothing there for Loomis. Like he is that much of a prick, right?
Right.
So it was one of those moments I was like, was this the man's last ditch effort to see if he could salvage the ruse that he's been living for this long? Or is this just, it tested badly that that Dr. Loomis is the fucking worst. So I don't know what you made of Loomis in this, but yeah, I thought shockingly low on my list of things that I would put at the top for this movie.
Yeah, he wasn't at the top for me.
No.
But I did like he had his moments.
Right.
Where it was kind of interesting and you're trying to figure out like, okay, what exactly is this guy's deal?
Right.
Like, what does he really expect to get out of this?
And that's the thing. He's interesting. Always default to interesting for me, right? Let's talk a little bit about, I think the violence in this movie is hard, right? And I think a great example of this is the Annie scene. That scene was almost too much for me, you know what I mean? And I watch a lot of horror movies. I am outed. I do not really love torture porn. I don't know that I would call it that, because that's a bit of a condescending label, right? That they're not doing anything except for being exploitative, right? There was a part of me, though, that's like, I watched that girl run away from Michael Myers as his niece in part 4 and part 5. So to me, she is a young girl. Now watching her not only run away from Michael Myers, but she has to have her tits out. It's so long and so dragged out.
It is.
It was hard for me to get past that, and it really fucking bothered me. The Annie scene really fucking bothered me, right? That said, do you think there's a method to that decision making, right? Because the other girl who just had sex and is, do you see anything you like? She gets her neck snapped and this and that, you know. We see Michael carrying a body, which is a strange thing that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah.
Him actually taking her to set her up, right? What do you make of that Annie scene? Why have it be so long and drawn out? We already know that Michael's a killer. We already know that he's scary.
Right.
This is one of those weird horror movie things to me where it's like, I understand in horror movies it's kind of something we all say, it's an unacknowledged truism. We all like more breast in our horror movies for the most part.
Sure.
This gets back to where I was just like, these are not fun boobs. I only want fun boobs in my movies, right? Like this adds, these are where boobs add sadness to me. It makes me, I want to like jump through the screen and cover up and be like, Michael, no! No, like it really.
Yeah.
My question to you: do you think there was a method to that bit of madness?
If there is, I don't see it. I kind of agree with you. It goes on a little long, and it's again like I'm gonna be real. I'm pretty desensitized to on-screen violence.
Yeah.
I have a very high threshold. But it did feel like, okay, well, we just killed one topless girl. In
and
the
see,
other
that
friend,
I would
Linda.
put in the category of those were still fun boobs, right? That's within bounds
Right,
to me.
yeah. By the time we get to Annie, yeah, they're boobs of tragedy.
Tragedy
And-
boobs. No one wants the tragedy boobs. Yeah. But I wonder, because I wondered in my mind, I was like, is this only because this is little Jamie? This is little Jamie Strode, right? Like, I don't want to see little Jamie like this. Or would it have been the same if it was another actor? Because I think all the kills are so fucking brutal. But when Michael's sister gets stabbed a bunch in the opening of the movie and is rushing through the halls, I didn't really feel bad about that. This one really got me. I wondered if in a bit it was Rob Zombie rubbing our nose in it. You know what I mean? In a way, he's making us somewhat complicit. And he's like, this is what you paid to see. You keep coming to see Michael Myers murder. It's not always a quick kill. He is a sick fuck, right? And so we are spending a little extra time. Again, that Orca Seal thing. You will sit and watch the true scarring horror of one of these events. This isn't I will leap out and choke you for 30 seconds and then, go to my next hiding spot. So I wondered if it was that or it walks that line for me. I could have done with less of that if it were me personally.
Understood.
Right. In part two, I think it does add a lot of interestingness for part two. But, all right. So we got a couple more things to discuss before we get out of here. Honorable mention, Joe Grizzly. Awesome scene. Great way to get the weird way. Like, how long did he watch until there was just another 7-foot tall trucker? Weird.
A while, I'm sure.
Joe Grizzly stands up to fight without wiping. Maybe don't take his suit after that. I'm not sure. Right? So Joe Grizzly, honorable mention.
Yes.
Ronnie.
Rest in peace.
Ronnie. Unmitigated filth as a man. Ronnie also got into that. Just bothered me, right? Because I talked about this on Twitter. We get a lot of those, what are your least favorite and most annoying characters in horror movies? And for me, it's always Franklin from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then I watched this movie, I was like, Ronnie's worse. Ronnie's the worst, right? When he talks about to her mom how nice of an ass her daughter has, that was it for me. I was like, you've everything about him is bad, but that one particularly gets into such creepy, disgusting territory. And again, it kind of eats at this core of Michael's and his mom's seemingly nice relationship, that she would hear that out loud and let this happen. Yeah. What did you think of Ronnie? Big fan?
Oh, he's awful. He's awful. And again, like, this is what this movie does. It's so interesting. Is like, I'm not sorry to see Ronnie go.
No, that might be the most like, this guy has to die. There are characters in horror movies that you see and you're immediately like, I will be excited when they get theirs. Ronnie is number one.
Like, I know it's wrong, and I know that killing Ronnie is just a stepping stone in the way to ending up killing Annie.
Yep. Ronnie's more wreckage left by this town and this system.
Right, but Ronnie is awful. I mean, he ticks all the boxes. Homophobia. He yelling at a crying baby.
He literally smacks all the dishes towards a kid who's locked in a baby chair. Right?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Making unwanted sexual advances at your girlfriend's daughter, teenage daughter.
Mentioned having an affair to the girlfriend who's paying all of his bills.
Yeah. Threatening violence, threatening to hit your girlfriend, like everything about this dude screams garbage.
There's a part of you that's like, if for one time I could Pleasantville my way into a movie and do the stabbing, Ronnie would be high on my list, right? Like, I'd probably take part in it. I'd help him saran wrap him at least, right? I might get out of there before I got blood on my clothes, but, I would help him saran wrap. The crazy thing is that it feels like not more than moments later, we meet another of the scummiest fucking characters in a horror. I think his name's Dwayne, right? Dwayne? The security guard who is excited to get the job so that he can just do rapes and beat up these what are they called in that? They're not, is that a prisoner hospital or are these patients?
It's
Both?
a prisoner hospital.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what the lingo is, but he wants to beat them up. He wants to establish dominance over these people because he probably doesn't find a lot of that in life.
Dude, he's awful. I think his last name was Klugs.
Yeah.
Even the name is just like, that
I don't
tells
like,
you something.
Don't like.
He's racist.
Yeah.
To begin with. He's talking to Danny Trejo's character, and he's like talking about your people and their bungalows. Like, oh my God. So already, strike one, you were racist towards Danny Trejo. Like,
yeah. Well, Rob Zombie knows. He's like, I got to give these something, right? It was an old rule when I was a writer on 1,000 Ways to Die, right? It's like, you can't kill the nice mom who just worked hard, cleaned the house all day, went to the grocery store and bought salads, and then is picking her kids up from soccer practice with a smile on her face and a sundress. You can't have that lady get run over by a semi-truck because people don't like that. It makes them feel bad. And Rob Zombie took that to its most logical conclusion, which is, I will make the most trash people of all time. And except for Joe Grizzly. R.I.P. Joe Grizzly. He didn't do anything wrong. He was pretty nice to all the...
He didn't.
Yeah, he seemed like a fun guy. I would have hung out with Joe Grizzly. All right, jumping back now that we've done our honorable and despicable mentions. This movie has one of the biggest missed opportunities of any horror movie I've ever watched. When Laurie wakes up and she's in the basement, the scene that Michael staged, right? Her friend is dead. She's holding it. It's an emotional scene, right? The tombstone is down there. Michael comes up to her and he shows her the picture. I don't know. And he's kind of pointing, right? He takes the mask off. This is the moment where Michael is willingly entering the human realm again, right? He's looking for a bond. He doesn't say anything, right? Why did Michael Myers not say boo? It works so well as one, that's your name, or two, I'm trying to scare you. I was like, say boo.
I know. Well, I was reading it. I think I saw it on Wikipedia that there was, I don't know if they actually filmed it or if it was at one point in the script and then they took it out. But I think I read that there was like, that was going to be part of the movie, and then it
felt
wasn't.
so set up that when it didn't happen, I literally was like, what the fuck? I was yelling at my TV. And again, you don't want Michael doing like a monologue.
No.
But I was like, him gruffly saying one word would have been a sledgehammer. A fucking, like when Caesar in Planet of the Apes says, no. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, fuck. These gorillas can talk. Or these chimpanzees, whatever Caesar is. I should know better. I read my kid animal books every day. But I was like, that one word he says, because he's saying it as a human moment. I want to reach out to you. You are the one I love. I still have a family. We can have family again. And she takes it as a mockery and stabs him, right? I was like, that one word would have had depths, man. That would have had layers. I wanted that word. Walk me through your thoughts as you saw Laurie pull the fucking trigger. Do the thing we want final girls to always fucking do. Walk me through your thoughts on that moment.
I'll tell you what. I loved it.
Loved it. I'll tell you too, that
and
shaky camera when she's, it's just
I loved it.
Brutal.
Scout Taylor Compton
Yes.
did such a tremendous job. So I agree with you about this whole end sequence that, kind of this whole second half that, borrows, but her performance is so good.
Yeah.
And in that moment when she I love that she's bloody and she's beat up and she's just come through and fallen out of this fucking window. And like she's she's going to make it stop.
Yeah.
She doesn't even know everything. She doesn't even know that her parents are dead yet.
Yeah.
She doesn't know the familial connection.
Mm-hmm.
But she has this opportunity to make it stop. And you can tell that she's just like, she's squinting. You can tell she's probably never fired a handgun in her life.
Oh yeah.
And she's pulling the trigger and she's squeezing the trigger. And when it finally does go off, the crying, like this is a young girl who is not a killer.
Yes. Well, that's what I like too. Imagine every one of those clicks, which not the shot, the emotion building up, right? The crescendo effect. And when that shot happens, she shoots him in the fucking face, which I think only Gale Weathers did in Scream, right? Which is kind of the meta, like we'll make a joke out of them not doing it, right?
Right.
Where you're always like, don't leave, don't walk away, don't be like, oh, I did it. We'll wait for the. She just crawls up on him after all this fighting. Instead of running, I will end this motherfucker right here. And when she finally hears the bang, the volcanic eruption, that primal scream, I fucking love that moment, man. And that's what I mean, though. I love that moment. I loved the fact seeing Michael stage this dead body for his sister, thinking that that's something they could bond over, that this is some kind of art piece about the fate of their family and mom. And then that, because that's why I was like, in my head, I'm like, what is Michael thinking in that moment? What is the best laid plan of Michael Myers, right? Of Mice and Michael Myers. In that moment, what does he think? Like, what does he want? Does she hug? Does she like, come on, brother? And they go trick-or-treating? Like, what is his best case scenario? And it's such a cool ad, right? And again, we do a lot of stabbing walls and punching doors and things that it's typical third act shit that doesn't really do much for a lot of us at that point. But I think that's the trick of this movie, right? Is if you can make it through some of the more abrasive and caustic elements of this film, I think it is easily one of the most interesting, insightful, and, just fascinating entries in the Halloween series. We've already seen all the kills. And this movie just says we'll make him bigger and badder, right? Yeah. So you get that. We also make him a human again. He's not some supernatural druid Jason Voorhees. He's a human who wants his sister back, who maybe just got pushed too far. I think there's so much of that extra depth that this one is just, it's weird because it's still hard to sit through for me. After all these times I've watched it, there's still scenes like sitting with Ronnie at breakfast. I almost always turn the movie off there, or I'm like, I'll just skip past this. But if you can get past that, there is so much awesome love letter to the Halloween series and what John Carpenter did. And I don't think this movie takes away from the canon or the lore of Halloween at all.
No.
None.
It couldn't. There's no way that it could.
That's true. Yeah, and that's the thing. Why keep making them if you're not going to try something different? I've never understood that. It's like, I always tell people Highlander 2 is my favorite sequel. And Highlander 2 is a pretty universally hated movie. And I was like, did you really just want to watch Connor McLeod's sword fight in modern day New York again? Again? No, get weird with it. Yeah, we did that. We fucking did. And this one has a lot of that fans. But that's what I'm saying. Cut that shit out. Just give me the new stuff. Give me the new looks. And I think this is a streamlined beast, man. Yeah. So overall, though, yay or nay on Rob Zombie's vision of Halloween?
I'm going to say this very clearly for the back row. Yay.
Yay. Yeah. I fucking love what he did. And I still, to this day, I would have liked to have done one more. It obviously, once we start watching part 2, feels like that was not probably going to happen. I think they were not going to do a Halloween 3 again with Rob Zombie at the helm. But I would have loved it. I like where his head's at in this world, right? And I think, like I said, you just get past the little rough edges. There's a beautiful bloody oasis in there. All right, guys, that's it for Rob Zombie's Halloween. Carmelita will be back joining us again tomorrow while we discuss I think it's actually H2 Halloween. It's like got a weird title, right? Essentially, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. So that's what we'll be discussing tomorrow. We will be riding our white stallions into battle with whatever's happening in that movie. I think other than Resurrection, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is the least appropriately appreciated Halloween movie. So thanks again, Carmelita, for actually volunteering to do this with me. And we will see you again tomorrow for Halloween 2.
Yay! I'm looking forward to it.
Hell yeah. As always, rate, review wherever you find the pod. Email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. Find us on your socials. Watch and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Nerd Alchemist. Bye.
Bye.